Hi, I'm Dr. Kyla, paediatric dietitian, fussy eating specialist, and mum of two. I'm the founder of the online Mealtimes memberships that help parents just like you experience a confident and guilt-free way of feeding children. I'm also a business owner, a hot cross bun lover, and my superpower is finding things that you cannot live without. In this podcast, I'm talking about feeding your family, along with a random selection of topics that tickle my fancy. Welcome to Mealtimes with Dr. Kyla. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. It has been a few months between chats, but I have a plan for the rest of 2026 to be back in your ears more regularly, so please hold me to that. Today's episode came about because we were sitting at lunch with some of the girls that I work with, and we were at work and we had to go and buy lunch. And yet we had all managed to pack multiple lunch boxes between us, I think 9 lunch boxes between us that morning or the previous night, yet none of us had been able to pack food for ourselves. And it got us talking about the things that we are willing to do for our children that we just aren't willing to do for ourselves. And we were just talking about how interesting it is that as kind of mothers or parents in this day and age, we're so good at prioritizing our kids' needs, but we leave ourselves till last, and it starts to impact us. So we were talking about what are the things that people do that we could maybe learn from when we're thinking about feeding our own kids. So the examples started flowing once we kind of realized what was going on. I'm thinking about, me and my youngest. I am obsessive about giving her iron supplement. So she takes Multifa, and I daily am kind of rigid about when that comes and what happens. Yet taking my own iron supplement is a roll of the dice on any given day of the week. Do you know how regular that is? Leaves a little bit to be desired. And so it's interesting, since I've been thinking about this podcast and doing it, I have actually started taking my iron at the same time that my daughter has her iron. And it's very interesting because apparently that helps. So here are some of the other examples that came up in our team and in our kind of extended circle of friends. And then I want to give you some things to kind of take away with you to think about how you can look after yourself in the same way that you look after your child. So there was a couple of examples where, and I mean, this applied to me absolutely when I had my first baby. I would make time for a meal for her where we would sit, we would, eat, explore the food. But then for some reason, I would wait until she was asleep, and she slept for 33 minutes every single time. So I would have to prep food, eat food, shower, respond to emails, tidy the house, all of those things in 33 minutes. And so I was shoveling food in while I was in the shower. I remember an example where she wouldn't go to sleep at the time I thought she was going to go to sleep. And I was so hungry. I was shaky and, I really realize how unhelpful this was now. But at the time I was I can't eat until she finally goes to sleep. And it took me ages, and I was just absolutely ravenous, but I couldn't make time for myself to eat around my baby. And it really goes to show how those early years are really a vacuum. You fall into patterns that you didn't realize you were going to. And so I even thinking about when we go out for the day, I've only just got into a habit of taking my own water bottle. I would always take a water bottle for the children, but for some reason, I would not take mine. It just got too heavy at that point. But I would be the one who lost out. So it kind of starts to make you kind of think. One of my friends shared an example where she's got a friend who would borrow books from the library. She would go and seek out toddler recipes. She would make all these amazing things for her toddler to refuse. And she would eat either scrambled eggs or a muesli bar for dinner herself. Just when you lay it out logically, it's kind of mind-boggling, that we're not looking after ourselves. What is that, all about? What else is kind of going on here? And I think having a little reflection on that maybe is helpful. I do think when you start feeding your own kids, it brings up a whole heap of, how do you want to do this? How do you want your kids to feel about food? And so I want to share some of the things that I think are probably really helpful for us to apply to our children and to ourselves. And before I do, I just want to share with you a member question that was asked not that long ago. And it kind of relates to this topic, and I think it's a really helpful one. So this was asked in the Mealtimes member group. This was in baby mealtimes. There are groups for babies, toddlers, and family as part of the membership. My team and I are in there every single day answering all of the questions that our members have, really getting them started, and answering all of the things that just crop up along the way, all those tiny little things that you maybe don't go and see a health professional for, but you do want some answers. So, this is the question. I'm after some general advice about offering the right foods to my daughter. I want meal plans or how to foster a positive relationship with food for her. I've been struggling with disordered eating since I was 15, and I just don't want to pass down these ideas to my child. It links in here, I think, because you start to realize a little bit about your own patterns when you were responsible for feeding other people. And so maybe, prior to having kids, you could just do what you did and that was your normal and kind of you never thought about it. But then when you had perhaps your first baby, you were starting to maybe buy some different foods, or you were thinking about how often you needed to eat. You were kind of making some time to do that. And it starts to kind of, I mean, for a lot of members that I speak to, it starts to have quite a profound impact on them. They actually start to feel a lot better about food. They start to make a little bit more time for themselves. But I want to give you some really explicit things that you can take away and do in your own life. So the first one is to make time to sit and eat. So one of my biggest taglines, I guess, is same food, same time. And basically that means sitting down with your child or your children, sharing similar or the same type of food at the same time. So you are literally having a meal with them, modeling the types of kind of behaviors that you'd like to see in the future. You're exposing them to the types of foods that you would like them to be able to eat. You're making meal times a shared experience. And we know that same food, same time benefits are significant. Kids can only learn from you when they actually get to see you, taking the time to sit and eat. So that might be dinner. That's the first place people tend to go, thinking about a family dinner, but it absolutely doesn't have to be. It can be thinking about a snack platter that is for you and for your child in the afternoon. It can be something that you both eat from. It can be a shared breakfast on the weekend. It can be a lunch when you're both at home and you're eating, kind of your meal has been deconstructed or is served to them as well. It absolutely does not have to be just at dinner, but the more that your kids can sit down and eat with you, the better for them, but actually the better for you too. So making the time to sit, eat, listen to your body, pay attention to the food that you're eating, perhaps, actually preparing something that you want to eat has such big positives for you as opposed to kind of shoveling in their crusts as your child has a beautifully cut out, shaped sandwich. So something that I think we can think about is, really how do we make that time for meals if you're working, from home or you've got time to yourself? How can you actually sit down and take the time to eat? My second one is to consider ways to nourish yourself without having just enough to get by. Now, this brings up a heap of things because if you've grown up in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, you have been really exposed to a lot of diet culture, and a lot of the messaging for women in particular is around, controlling their body size, their portions, the food they eat. There's a battle that we have to have with food. And so a lot of us have kind of learnt to either skip meals or cut down on food so that we are just eating enough to get by. And an example might be if you have been really busy and you've missed your lunch for the day and you think, oh, well, that's the kind of calories saved there. I'll just have something little and get through to dinner. That kind of thinking there is a really prime example of diet culture. It is really less about nourishing yourself and caring for yourself and more about minimizing calories wherever possible at whatever cost. And what we tend to find anyway is if you skip meals and you get to the point that you're so hungry, have a little snack, it opens up the floodgates because if you're get to the point that you're starving, you tend to kind of have something and then you nibble on something else and you nibble on something else. And you really don't end up in front if that's the way you were kind of thinking. And so, even just noticing those thoughts for what they are, like that's a really normal response for people who have been conditioned, to grow up where you are trying to minimize calories all the time. But just thinking about that, how can you think about ways to nourish yourself without focusing on, the calories or not having enough to be full or satisfied? There is a real power in your adult years to be thinking about what do you need to nourish yourself and to feel satisfied from a meal. That is one of the great pleasures in life, but also something that helps you to care for your body and look after it, which means that you're much less likely to be mindlessly kind of snacking on things at another point. And number three, eat fruit. It's so interesting. When I was talking about this with my team, we all buy berries and we all save them for the children because they're $6 a punnet at a minimum. And for some reason, we don't eat those ourselves. We're giving the best of that to our kids. And one of the members of my team pointed out a account, which I actually follow, Mum Life Comics, and she's got a tagline, Eat the Damn Peach, because we spend our lives protecting these beautiful pieces of fruit for our children without looking after ourselves. And so I want to ask you, like, how much fruit do you eat as an adult? And how much fruit do your children eat? If you are cutting up fruit to share, could you make that a same food, same time, where you get to have a bit of the fruit as well? Because fruit is a really nutritious food. It's great for you. It's tasty. I think we're missing out on the berries and the peaches. Let's look after ourselves. Number four, pack a lunchbox for yourself. This is something that I am so guilty of, and I can't quite get my head around why. I think it's to do with the bulk of taking something with me. It's an extra lunchbox to take. But if we are going out for the morning, for example, and we may or may not be home for lunchtime, I will often take a lunchbox for my two children. So I'll pack it off the night before so I don't have to think about it. And we've got that there so that if we stop somewhere, we do something fun, we've got food on hand. I don't have to buy stuff that I just don't want to buy, I don't want to spend money on or, don't want to have. And so they have these options. But there are times, especially I remember last year when I was home with my youngest and we would go out, she'd go and do some gymnastics and we'd go to the shops afterwards or something. I didn't want to buy food. I didn't want to kind of spend money on food out when I had, leftovers or something at home. But I would get to the point that I was so hungry that we had to leave because I like got all shaky and grumpy and cranky and I needed to come home for lunch. And if I had just packed that leftover for myself, like I have mini thermoses, I have lunch boxes, I could absolutely have taken something for myself, but I didn't. So that is one of my resolutions. Can you call it a May New Year resolution? Is to actually think about like what food can I take for myself so that I am not cranky, hangry when we're out and we don't have to come home before I'm ready to come home because I actually have enough food. And yes, I like absolutely could buy something, but when you've got like a delicious meal or you've got leftovers or you've just got food at home that you need to use up, buying something from a food court just seems like a waste of time and money and buying food out. It's not what I wanted. And then also I'd probably have to buy something for the children because they'd be upset, all the things. All right, next up. Ask yourself what your tummy says. Now, this is something that we've got into the habit of doing really early with my kids in this idea of, when you get to the end of the meal and they've said they've had enough, you're saying, if your tummy says you're full, no worries. Or if your tummy says you need some more, sure, have some more. And so that's not about kind of like having food to eat all throughout the day and grazing. It's about when it's time for eating and what you've got on your plate. Does your tummy tell you that you want more? And for a lot of us, if you're a parent, you probably haven't grown up in that kind of culture where you were taught to trust your body. You've probably been taught to override your body. You either eat everything that's on your plate to please the person that served you, or you try and eat not too much because you don't want to gain weight. And so they're the kind of two messages we've been taught. And instead, I want you to gently ask. At the beginning, it might feel like, I don't know what my tummy says. I literally do not know if I'm still hungry or full. I'm so used to overriding it. But I really just want you to, if you prompt your child with that, gently ask yourself, what does your tummy say? You could rate your hunger if you wanted to. You could just gently tune in and listen. You don't even have to act on it. But it would be so helpful, I think, for us for the rest of our lives, if we really started asking ourselves, what does your tummy actually say right now? And not in an attempt to limit you, not in an attempt to always have more, but just to truly tune in to what your body says. I think we spend decades trying to ignore our body, and then there's a real power in actually starting to listen to what it says. And on that note, my next point is actually to buy clothes that fit your body. This doesn't relate to meal times specifically, but it really does in the body kind of component. So when your child grows and they no longer fit in their shorts, I want you to really think about what you say in your head. Like, yeah, the shorts are too small. Sorry, yes, that is exactly what I want to say. Sure, they've gotten bigger, their body's gotten bigger, but those shorts are too small for their body. It's the shorts problem. They just don't fit this body that your child now has that they've got bigger. I want you to think about that for your own body. You deserve to wear clothes that feel good when you put them on, that are comfortable to sit in, that you can move around in, that you can live your life in without being kind of pushed or prodded or poked by your clothes. And I think that is such a powerful message for us to hang on to. I think a lot of us kind of hold on to really small clothes or squeeze into things because we think there's what is it? A value? It's important to be in smaller clothes. The number on the tag, makes a difference to you. And I gently question what that's about. It absolutely still affects me. And I've done a lot of work in this space. But my question is really around, like, does it serve you to be squeezing into pants that make you feel uncomfortable? If you've got a top that restricts your movement, like, think about your kids. What do you want for them? I want them to be able to move freely in their clothes, to really not think about what they're wearing, not to be bothered by it. And I say that because my 5-year-old is bothered by almost all clothes that she wears. We have only a couple of pairs of shorts and t-shirts that feel just right and not bothering her. So I know what it feels like for her, but I really want us to allow that kind of comfort for ourselves. And next up, speak neutrally about food in your own head. This is one of the things, particularly for that question that was asked, how do I give my child a start with food, a positive relationship with food for her? I would love you to start speaking really neutrally about food or noticing when you're speaking in a judgmental way in your head. So if you are feeding your child, let's say we're at a party and they're having some twisties. If that starts a little story in your head about the twisties, or perhaps you're talking ultra processed, perhaps you're worried about the preservatives, I don't know, whatever it is that's bothering you in your head, I would love you to reframe that to like, my child is eating some twisties. Literally just the name of the food. You don't have to add any junk food. It's not good for them. It's bad. Any of that kind of chat. Because what we know is the more neutral you can be about food and the more permission you actually have to eat it without guilt or shame, the less likely you are to go overboard because you actually give yourself permission. You are not fighting against anything. That is really powerful if you can be neutral about food for yourself. It absolutely flows onto your kids. You do not have to teach them good food, bad food. In fact, it's really problematic. And I think this is a topic for a whole nother podcast on its own. But I would just gently check in with the chat that's going on in your head. Are you speaking neutrally? Are you thinking, oh, I've just eaten crap this weekend? That is what I want you to reframe. Really thinking about how you can take the emotion out of the way that you think about food. And so a lot of us are great at doing this with kids, really not trying to guilt or shame them into eating, but it is something we absolutely do to ourselves. And so a nice just little kind of checkpoint, is that something you are doing? And can you catch yourself? You don't even have to change your thinking necessarily, but can you even catch yourself in that moment? Have a bit of a giggle like, oh, there it is. She was right. I am saying these kinds of things in my head. Even that is enough of a thing to do first. This kind of change is quite big. So even just catching yourself talking about food, the way you talk about food in your own head is really powerful. And then my final point is to make food for yourself. Now, this seems kind of basic, but I will often bake things, for my kids' lunch boxes. I will bake and store things, that are left over in the freezer, but I very rarely do that for myself. And so I'm often either having kind of their leftovers, if it's a day when I'm at home, I'm having like some of the kids' freezer meals that I have from Our Love. I will have just a random mixture of things. And so one of the greatest achievements I've had in 2026 is that my friend and I will meet up once a week. We'll sometimes do exercise, we'll sometimes just do chatting. But as a catch up, what we actually do is cook a meal for us for the week, not for our families, not for our children, just for us for lunches. And so we make enough, we double a recipe, and we have our catch up like while we're doing it. The kids are often playing, but we actually prepare a lunch and we freeze it in portions and we have that for the week. And it has been a game changer for me to know that like when it's lunchtime, I have something I can heat up really quickly. It's something that's delicious, it's nutritious. I don't have to put a lot of time into it. I feel like quite great about being able to sit down to a proper meal rather than thinking about what I can scavenge together. But something that we would, if in that early phase of baby feeding, you're often portioning out food for your kids, you're thinking about what could they have next week, I'll get ahead, but we hardly ever do that for ourselves. So little kind of thought, is that something that you could build into your life as well? So if we go back to that kind of member question, she was talking about, I want some general advice about offering the right foods to my daughter. Here are the types of things that I'm thinking about. It's about having those regular meals and snacks. It's about thinking about the types of foods that are in the meal. And for kind of my mealtimes members, what I'm talking about is a protein food, a carbohydrate food, and a fruit or veg. So it's about that balance, kind of nourishing foods. There's a range of things. Not getting obsessed about it though. None of this kind of negative chat. You can just be really neutral about food and not give it too much thought or too much chatter is really helpful. I think this idea about kind of buying clothes that fit for your body, making food, serving it, sharing it, enjoying it, they are the most powerful things that you can do. Is actually less about healthy, less about, choose the best. It's actually about those tiny little shifts in what you do that make it more enjoyable for you and therefore more enjoyable for her. I will note that if you have had a really strong history of disordered kind of eating, it can bring up a whole heap of things when you do have your own child. And there are some beautiful dietitians, therapists out there who do some great support for bringing up for some of your own stuff that comes up around this, particularly if you are still kind of struggling with it. I can link to the podcast that I did with Claire Gasper from Diet Free Me in the show notes. That was an earlier episode. Really, really helpful listen if you haven't listened to that already. So I hope that has been a helpful reflection for you. I'm interested to hear from you. What are the things that you do for your kids that you don't do for yourself? Are there any that I've talked about here that kind of ring true for you that you think, yeah, that would probably be in my benefit to actually adopt that kind of habit? I'm really interested to hear if they struck a chord. Thanks for being here. I look forward to the next Mealtimes podcast. I've already got a couple of ideas in mind, but if you have something you would love me to talk about, I would love to hear from you. So you can send me a DM or you can send me a contact form on the Mealtimes membership at mealtimes.com.au. If you would have lots of questions you would like answered, I would love to invite you to join me in the Mealtimes membership. You get every single question that you have answered by me and my team of feeding specialists. It is one of our favourite things to do at our work. So come and join us today. Thanks for being here.
A huge thanks for tuning in and listening to my podcast. This is all brand new for me, so I'd love to hear your feedback. Give me a review or send me a DM. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And above all, I'd really love you to hit that subscribe button to keep listening. Thanks.